Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for coming out, and appreciate the patience for the technical difficulties and the construction, I suppose. We're ready to go, right? Okay, inshallah khair. So, again, Jazakallah khair for coming. So today's topic, as you guys have probably seen from the title, right, is a Muslim's perspective on structural inequality, right? And some of you may be thinking, what exactly does this have to do with perhaps some community or the masajid, or what exactly are we trying to discuss here, right? And I want to just contextualize, right, that today's topic is regarding a critical set of conversations and ideas taking shape around us. And as you brothers know, right, it is ideas and concepts and these discourses that actually shape our reality, they shape behavior, policy, our understanding, etc. And so accordingly, as Muslims, our job is to understand our reality and our environment so that we can shape it according to Islam, and in the reverse, so we can prevent our Islam from being shaped by our environment or reality. And this is an extremely important conversation that we need to have, and we need to be at the forefront of as a Muslim community, because this is something that is going to touch us all, whether that's individually, whether that's concerning our children in schools, our community, and actually, our ummah as well. And I just wanted to reiterate, right? So these type of conversations as a community, as individuals, we cannot be on the back foot. We cannot be on the defense, right? And the concept is either you are, giving dawah, or you are receiving it, right? It's a one way or the other, and there is no other state we can be in. So before we jump into the topic for today, right, I want to kind of contextualize again what this talk is going to cover. And the topic of inequality, right, or structural inequality, it is a huge, vast topic. It's multi-layered, covers numerous different segments. Whether we're looking at history, politics, etc., many different things, right? And unfortunately, we don't have the time and capacity to cover that all in this particular session. So what is this session about? So this session is going to be talking about, very briefly, right, what are some of the prominent discussions or discourses or things that are happening around us? What are the ideas? What is basically going on, like, in our environment, in our community? And from there, we're going to try to understand it. We're going to try to apply a rational method of thinking so we can break it down. And ultimately, once we've done that, we're going to try to sort of frame this discussion in an Islamic lens. So ultimately, like I said, we can work to shape our environment according to Islam and prevent and protect ourselves and our Islam from being shaped by the reality around us. And so we have about 30 minutes, and then we're going to kind of split it to the Q&A. So what is going on? What is when you think of structural inequality, what sort of ideas kind of come to your head? As I was sort of thinking about this, perhaps the first one and the most prominent, especially as you grow up, here, is the history of structural racism, right? Or perhaps the deep history of, slavery within America. And obviously, we're in the month of June. I'm sure you guys are all aware, right? Very recently, June 19 has been considered like a sort of a national holiday to commemorate the emancipation of African Americans as slaves, right? And I want to also highlight what are people sort of saying about these type of things, right? And you have on one side a completely factual narration of what happened, right? Perhaps it is the historical account of the brutal slavery that occurred in the U.S. or in many areas, right? You hear conversations about reparations, yes or no. Should people that are historically linked to communities that had injustice done to them be compensated? monetarily, economically, or whatnot. On the other side are people who are descendants of people that committed injustice in some way, shape, or form, responsible for what happened. Must they bear the sin of their forefathers? And sort of who is to blame? And we see this is a very polarized discussion, right? People are fighting on one side and on the other side, and it's not something that's easy to tackle, or so it seems. And even more so regarding this idea of racism or this historical baggage, there is this idea that, look, there is sort of a structural thing going on to keep certain communities to the ground, keep certain communities weak, keep certain communities from advancing or progressing, and that this cannot be blamed just on an individual attitude. So it is to say, there are ideas that say that this is not a problem of racism on the individual level in particular, right? It's not to say, people say that every white guy, so to speak, is a racist, but it is this interconnected web maze of laws, legislation, structures that create a reality that creates advantages for Group A and disadvantages for Group B. What else is going on? And again, like I mentioned, this is something we can go into detail after detail and expand upon, but for the interest of this discussion, we're going to kind of keep moving forward. So what else is going on? What is on the minds of the people, right? There's also this idea of family, right? We see a sort of schism that has been breaking out for a long time, right? Maybe even since the 1970s, between the traditional family and individualism or individual freedom, or living your own life and things of that sort. Ideas of who are what exactly are the roles in a family? Who decides it? Who's right and who's wrong? We have ideas that say that historically, arguments are presented that there has been historically throughout history, or perhaps throughout the last couple hundred years, a systematic oppression of perhaps women, right? Based on an organized systemic system, right? Which they refer to as patriarchy. And therefore there is a need of liberation, right? Liberation of roles, liberation of structures that are holding people back. There is ideas now that even the family as a unit is an oppressive structure, because who is to say that your job is to take care of this responsibility and my job is to take care of this? Who writes that outline? And we see this on a day-to-day life, right? Whether we're at work or within our families or school or these institutions, these conversations and the ones we're going to mention permeate our environment. And as things move further, right, there's even other schisms, right? Other conflicts. The group identity versus the individual, right? What is important? And I mean, even now, there's a documentary released recently, I'm sure many of you guys are aware, right? To even ask, like, can you define for me, what is a man or what is a woman, is something that is up for debate, right? And again, there's this frame, there's this discussion taking place that there is a structural inequality that's going on. There is a structural design that is based on laws, based on legislation, based on history, giving advantages to one group and marginalizing another. We have even again, as some of you guys may have heard, right? We live in an age where, the age of medieval heretics is gone, right? No one is saying, perhaps you're not a Protestant or you're not a Catholic, therefore you must be hung, you must be called a heretic. But we live in an age where if you do not subscribe, adopt, take in, believe in, advocate, accept the prevailing norms and ideologies of the day, you are a social heretic. You are perhaps backwards, oppressive, uncivil. Perhaps, in certain countries or states, perhaps the state can decide, you know what, you're not qualified to raise your children. We will take them on. Or perhaps certain roles and responsibilities are not necessary and they can be removed. You believe that, for example, hijab is fur, like in certain places like France. Well, too bad you can't enter school, you know, because this is an oppressive tool. A bit ironic that, you know, in order to liberate, you must oppress, right? And just to kind of keep moving further, I think today marks actually a very interesting and critical day as well. Today is June 24th. And there's something buzzing all over the country today. And anyone know what that is? Roe versus Wade, perfect, right? So after 49 years, the injunction by the Supreme Court under the case of Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and the Supreme Court has done basically a 180. So for 49 years, there was this legislation, there was this understanding, there was this set of laws that said from 1973 onward, the topic of abortion, the verdict on this matter is that it is allowed, it is your constitutional right, it is your right to do this, right? Based on the laws and legislation. And for 49 years, this is what has occurred, nearly 50 years. And today, out of the blue, perhaps, you know, seemingly, especially in light of everything else going on, we see a U-turn. We see that on June 24th, 2022, that precedent is now canceled. And not only is that precedent and we cancel that, you know, that abortion is your right, which would consequently mean that many of the countries that are split are gonna have a mess to deal with. You know, is it based on your state legislature? Is it based on the federal legislature? And all the historical cases that have gone previously, the ruling has also mentioned, are cannot be used as a precedent. So in essence, 50 years of laws, 50 years of human lives, 50 years of, you know, obviously babies and deaths and all these things have been erased, have been switched and turned 180 as if it's, you know, it's nothing, right? And accordingly, there's, you know, there's a lot of strife about this. You know, people are up in arms. People are you know, chanting, protesting. You know, Allahu Alam, you know, how things can, you know, erupt and move forward from there. But, you know, people are divided. You know, is it my body? Is it my choice? Who decides? Who gave these people authority? You know, and you find in general a sense of unrest, a sense of lack of harmony. You know, as we're discussing about this. So I mean, let's keep moving forward. What else exactly is going on around us? I mean, we know, for anyone that's lived here for you know, for even a short amount of time, that the family structure is in social disarray. And we know, you know, whether you live here or you live anywhere, that this ideas of structural inequality don't just stop there. It goes further, and perhaps most prominently, economically, right? I mean, we all know it. We all kind of grew up here. We read the books. We, you know, saw things on TV that, you know, very evidently, there is a huge split. There is a huge source of inequality between those who have and those who do not. Those that are rich and those who are not. Those that have billions and those that are paycheck to paycheck. Those that are, you know, I think just to put into perspective, right? This is a quote, you know, I heard by quite recently. It was actually a talk that was here before. I believe Dr. Malkawi was giving it. And he said, just to put into perspective, right, there are certain individuals, I believe it was like Jeff Bezos, that have their net worth equivalent to about $2 billion. And he's like, let's put that mathematically so we understand it. So if that's, you know, roughly, if you spend $1 million a day, it would take you, I think it was excess of 2,000 years, and someone can do the math and you know, clarify for me, in excess of 2,000 years to spend that $2 trillion. That is mind-shattering. You know, mind-blowing. And even in the richest country in the world, as we know, there's people that have no idea where the next meal is going to come from, have no idea, you know, how to afford groceries or these things, right? And so there's a very apparent inequality, you know, and something that seems structural. And again, on this topic, I mean, you know, there's there's not much to say. I mean, this is so prominent. This is so common knowledge that the trajectory, the trend is that the rich always get richer and the poor always get poorer. And and systemically, right? The hoarding of wealth is something that's systemic. The use of interest riba for the benefit of Group A is prevalent and well known, and at the cost of Group B, which is the vast majority, is also known. And so I brought up sort of a lot of topics, right? And again, to give each individual topics justice, it requires not just one session, but significant amount of sessions. And maybe this is something that we can definitely look into forward. But I want us to, for a second, take a step back and ask ourselves a couple of questions. What are some of the common traits that, if you're paying attention, perhaps you've picked up in these examples so far? Well, number one, just to start it off, right, is that there is this common thread in this fabric, this narrative that we're hearing, that there is a privileged group and there is a marginalized group. And therefore, equality is needed to balance this out, to create that harmony. What else are we, sort of the common threads that we're hearing? We're hearing that there's this idea about power. Power keeps coming up over and over. Power must be balanced, and there's this idea of who does power belong to and who has sort of hoarded power. As we keep moving forward, another common thread in all this, right, is the idea that the individual freedom is paramount, right? As we've discussed, there's obviously been a lot of like huge debates, schisms. Is it the individual that is paramount, most important, or is it the family? Is it the community? Is it the society? And I mean, evidently, the trajectory in all of these is still that the individual is paramount, and we have to kind of ask ourselves why that is. And again, to really break this down from an ideas perspective, from history, Enlightenment, how did we exactly get here? Liberalism, neoliberalism, modernism, postmodernism. We're not going to get into that, but what I do want you guys to understand from there is that there is a set of first principles. There's a set of ideas that you just assume are right, and it's something that we can't just take for granted. We got to ask, is individual freedom paramount? Is it the most important thing that must, happen? And as long as that's there, everything is good. Okay, and okay, as we keep moving on, right? What are common threads that are here? Commonly throughout all of these examples and scenarios we're looking at is this idea of how power, morality, and law go hand in hand. And there is specifically on these ideas of laws and legislature, lots of debate, and it elicits lots of anger from many groups and lots of acceptance on others, right? Just looking at the example that we talked about today, the landmark sort of change from the Supreme Court that Roe v. Wade is gone. This it fundamentally is a set of laws that were set in place, and even when during its inception, people were extremely divided. Morally, I'm against this. Politically, I'm against this. I can't. This is not something that can work. You're murdering babies. You're taking away life, right? And in certain other camps, we heard echoing, no, this is absolutely great. This is amazing. This is a fundamental right. Because my freedom is paramount. It's my body, it's my choice. All these things that I'm sure we've heard of, right? And and we hear that laws are there to correct biases and prejudice, but we find that in 50 years, for example, this has been changed like that. But still, no matter what is the outcome? Okay, in 2022. As this has been overturned, we see splitting all over the country, and for all those that are watching, people say this is bias, this is unacceptable. Some people advocate these are our rights. Some people say, well, these are not your rights, and there is a split, and we see how laws in particular, legislature, who has the right to say what is permissible and not permissible, creates disarray, creates lack of harmony, creates strife in society. I mean, every single day, like it seems like, people are dividing further and further. It's not only, let's just say, quote unquote conservatives and quote unquote liberals. Okay, then it subdivides. The people that want abortion, the people that don't want abortion. Then it subdivides. Well, I'm, based on your race, it goes further and further and further. And instead of the idea of society coming together, instead of the idea of social harmony, love, understanding, we find things going in the opposite direction, right? Just from our like a macro view, right? We see family breaking down. We see, it's crazy to say. I have some young kids that are about to, start school, and I think a lot of you either are in high school or whatever, or school, and there is now a fear that should I send my kids to school or not? Will they get shot or will they not get shot? Will they, is the teacher going to tell them, if you're a boy, you can dress like a girl, if you're a girl, you can dress like a boy? Or, it's kind of crazy. I was kind of hearing about this thing, but just as an aside, and if I'm short on time, I can skip it, so just let me know. But, I was going to say, like, if anyone that has kids or young children or, just younger brothers or siblings or cousins or whatnot, kids are funny, man. Like they'll like start, they'll watch a movie on dinosaurs and they're gonna start talking like dinosaurs. Or they'll watch a movie about horses and they'll start like neighing like a horse. I was like, well, just because a kid believes he's a horse or a dinosaur, are you gonna believe that? And interesting enough, I mean, that is actually another group, another subtopic, another division that's rising. It's called like furries. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but basically someone can say, I feel like a wolf, so therefore this is my identity, right? I feel like a whatever, a rooster, a chicken. I mean, whatever it may be. So this is not really far-fetched. And again, we see this idea of disarray because of laws. People are split, and we see contradictions and a lack of stability. How is it that 49 years ago you could say decisively, this is something that's correct, this is something that is permissible, this is something that's praiseworthy, amazing, this is part of what you are, you're a human being, and then 49 years later you can say, well, that's, forget about everything we said before. Now the new law of the land is that this particular right is no longer your right. Too bad, too sad. If you went to jail before because of whatever reason, I mean, that's just what it is. In the future, if things change, that's just what it is. Either you accept it or you can go to jail. You can, what can you do? Either you accept it or you're met with force. And so there's a lot to unpack there, a lot to unpack, and there's certain theories and things I want to discuss, but I might leave that for the end if you have time. But I want to kind of take a step back collectively, okay? Like we kind of have a view of what is perhaps going on a high level, where there's certain themes and threads that we've sort of isolated. Now let's take a step back, and I want us to really apply our rational mind, right? Can we make sense of this? So the first thing that I think that we really have to set certain baselines, right? And the first thing is that, look, as human beings, we have to recognize, first of all, our nature, right? That we are limited and dependent creatures or beings by our nature, right? That means that we depend on something. We need food, we need water, we need sustenance. We're limited. We were only alive for maybe 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And therefore, our knowledge is limited. Our understanding is limited. We depend on so many things to survive, to understand. Our understanding of history is dependent upon, narrations that we get. The fact that we believe China is real, for example, is based on, certain testimony that we accept, because we know that we do not have the capacity as limited independent beings to be everywhere, to verify everything, to conduct every science experiment, to verify every fact. We know there's only so many books we can read in a day. There's so many, so many days we have to live, so many breaths, etc. So we're limited and dependent. But that also means that everything that comes from us, whether that's our understanding, whether that's our likes, our dislikes, they're also limited and dependent, right? And I think everyone here sees that. At 10 years old, for example, you had a certain conceptualization of the world. You had a certain conceptualization of what you like, what you didn't like. And at 20, at 15, at 20, it definitely changed, right? And at 30, perhaps it's going to change. At 40, it's going to change. And, because of our limited nature, it's continually changing. And accordingly, right, if we're talking about our nature as human beings, we know that human beings are imperfect, right? We're prone to mistakes. We're prone to misjudgments, to biases, ignorance. And because of those biases and ignorance, perhaps even oppression. And this can be out of sincerity, true, as well, right? You can be extremely sincere. But because you're limited, you came upon the wrong conclusion. You came upon the wrong judgment, and you could oppress someone, right? Just as an example, and keep me on the time, just as a Quranic example, just to give context to this, right? When Musa alayhi salam is witnessing a fight between two people, right? One is someone that's from Bani Israel, and one is from the people of Egypt that live there, right? He makes a judgment that I have to help my brother, my tribesman, whatever, and he fights and he accidentally kills the person. But later on, he finds out that actually it was the person from Bani Israel that was instigating things, right? So he was actually the person that did. So it does not mean that he was sinful, but even in your sincerity, right, as limited human beings, we can make mistakes, misjudgments, right? And especially on this part, as we're getting to the rational side of things, if anything's unclear, feel free to interject or stop me, and we can kind of go there. Okay, moving on forward, right? Rationally, we must also agree and come to the conclusion that it is impossible to completely understand each person's individual needs, emotions, thoughts, and even what's good for them. And I mean, to be honest with you, again, as we're looking and reflecting upon our own lives, what we thought was good for us at age 10, age 15, age 20, it keeps continually changing, doesn't it? I mean, it's almost like a meme at this point, right? But as you know, when you're talking to people today, it's kind of like the response is usually like, what are you talking about? How can you make a judgment on this? You don't know my lived experience. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what it means to be category X or Y or Z or whatnot. How can you make a judgment on something you don't understand? Well, you're a man. How could you understand? Well, you're a woman. How could you understand, right? So we see this all the time. And obviously it's a bit exaggerated in the world we live in today, but there is a truth to it, isn't there? Is that no matter how sharp we are, how smart we are, I don't know everything about you or you or you. And to be honest with you, I almost barely know everything about myself. Right? So let's keep moving forward. And we have to understand as human beings, right, as men, as mankind, that we strive, we move based on certain things that are common to everybody, certain needs, organic needs, and instincts, right? We know if we don't eat, we're gonna die. We need to eat. We know if we don't take a breath, we have 4 or 5 minutes, they say, to live. We know that we gotta work. We know that, after a long days of work, I get tired. I need to replenish myself with sleep. We know that there's an intake, man. I gotta get married. I'm like 25, I'm 30, whatever. So there's something that's pushing me. I want kids. I want to get married. I have to survive. I want the nice things in life. There's a thing that's pushing you, etc. Right? And we also have to acknowledge, rationally speaking, right, that in principle, as human beings, there is no inherent superiority between one person to another as limited and dependent human beings. And what do I mean by that? I'm not saying that one guy can't be stronger than the other, or one person can't be smarter or whatnot, but it's the acknowledgement that by our nature, we don't inherently, objectively, we cannot inherently objectively say that I am superior to you, or that you are superior to me or better than me. You just can't. Because if you just think about it, it's so common, right? Let's say you have a sibling, a brother or a sister, right? And they tell you, go throw out the trash, or, I ordered you to go there. I'm sure some of you guys have siblings have done this. I ordered you, get me some water. I ordered you to sit down, and then a fight interrupts and, things go forward because you're like, who are you to tell me what to do? Even if you're a year older or 2 years older, who are you to tell me, it's just natural. It's in our fitra, right? That we don't accept people as naturally superior to us, inherently speaking. Okay, and then moving forward, just rationally speaking, right, that when human beings, right, assume authority over each other, it is actually through exploitation or capitalizing on another person's limited or dependent nature. And so I just want to scale that back. So what do I mean by that? So, okay, if we recognize that as human beings, we're all limited, dependent, then conventionally, historically, rationally, how does one person assume superiority or authority? Well, it's through exploitation of another person's dependencies. I mean, this can be, obviously in an oppressive nature, but also it's natural to look. Although, like a baby and a mother are both dependent and limited, obviously, a mother can take care of her baby in ways that are needed, right? So obviously, she can assume superiority, authority, etc. There's things that are natural. But oh man, I have a lot to get through. Okay, maybe we'll extend this a little bit, but he's giving me the 10-minute mark, but I think we need to get through a couple things. But the thing is, but how does it work conventionally? Okay, the thing is, look, we can't by a principle say, hey, I'm better than you, obey me, right? So how does it happen? Well, I got some money. You want a job? I'll give you a certain money. Okay, so I'm using a need you have in order for you to do what I want. Or, if you don't do this, well, I got some thugs in the back with guns. You're gonna do it now, aren't you? Or, hey, if you don't listen to me here, guess what? I'm gonna sanction you. That medicine that you need for your kid, well, you're gonna have a real hard time getting it. Or perhaps it can be, it's even like, essentially what it comes down to, what we see around us, it really boils down to might makes right. If you have the power, you can assume authority. And that power is essentially used by exploiting other people's limited and dependent nature. If you have, okay, I'm gonna keep going based on because we don't have a lot of time. So if we understand that reality of what it means to be a human being and how human interactions happen, we gotta also recognize, and this is perhaps a little easier for us as Muslims, that in principle, authority and sovereignty, who can order you around, who can tell you what to do, in principle comes from a higher entity than yourself, and even a higher entity than human beings. And this has to be something that by its nature, principally, is not limited or dependent, right? Because just like your brother, yeah, you're bigger than me, oh, so what? I don't care. I'll lift some weights, I'll get bigger. But so you don't inherently have authority over me. But I will accept something, authority from someone someone or something that is evidently, without doubt, superior to me, is not dependent, and it's not limited. And we're going to cut this short a little bit, but obviously as Muslims we know that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is not dependent on anything, whom is not dependent on anything, but everything else is dependent on Him, whom everything and everyone depends on for their sustenance, for their survival, for their understanding. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we know from that taught Adam alayhi salam how to speak, taught him words, so essentially taught him knowledge, taught him how to think about things. Taught all these things. And I mean, it's just funny, even the breath we take, right? And I heard this recently, is that if you were to not take a breath, right, you have perhaps 4 or 5 minutes to live. So even to that degree, we're constantly dependent, right? But Allah is the one who is not dependent, who is not limited. And therefore, if Allah says to me, if Allah orders me to do this or to do that, I don't find in my heart a discomfort. I'm like, okay, I mean, that makes sense. Allah is the one who's not limited. He's the one with full understanding. He's the one that, understands me better than I understand myself. I mean, obviously. So just to kind of tie some of these things together, right? In the absence of ruling by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, at best, human beings can produce mistakes and misjudgments sincerely, out of ignorance, or as worst, manifest as oppressors to purposely prey on each other's limited and dependent nature, and even further to try to make themselves gods instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is just practically what we see. This is undeniable based on history. And definitely, if you think otherwise, we can challenge that in the question and answer. But let's just, in the interest of time, keep moving forward. So, and as Muslims, look, it's not just the Creator that tells us what to do, right? The Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also tells us what our purpose is as human beings, right? One of the common threads that we talked about before, this first principle was that, individual freedom is the most important thing. It is essentially the purpose of your life. But, the answer to this as Muslims is that, no, look, our purpose is also set by the Creator, which is not individual freedom, but to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is how our role and our destiny manifests. Now, I want to kind of put that all together, right? And we talked a little bit about what's going on today. We talked about the different schism. We talked about how, based on laws and legislature, there's a lot of things that are breaking down, disconnect, disharmony. We talk about rationally how things break down. If we're limited, of course, look, we're going to make mistakes. This is just the rational process. And we talk about how when you remove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the equation, when you remove God from the equation, when you remove that higher entity that is not limited or dependent, you will have mistakes. And so when you remove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the equation, what you have is might makes right. If I'm stronger, I call the shots. If you're weaker, you must obey, or I'll take your life away. I'll take your wealth away. I'll take your kids away. I'll take these things away. So if we're to put this in the Islamic lens, right? And we're going to talk about Surah Ma'idah a little bit, and I think we're going to have to cut it short, right? But of course, we can always start from the Quran and Sunnah, right? That is, of course, our natural starting point. But sometimes, especially in the times we live in, it's important to understand the reality. It's important to understand rationally, okay, how are some basic things? And when we hear the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it naturally reaffirms what is so evident, what is so obvious, or what is perhaps should be so obvious, but has been made dirty, made unclear based on our environment, right? And so is it surprising that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this directly, right? He tells us this implicitly in many places in the Quran, but in Surah Ma'idah, right? Ayahs 44 onwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the answer to this very clearly, explicitly, without doubt, without contradiction, right? That when we're looking at inequality, injustice, who calls the shots, what is the answer to it? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and we don't have time at this moment to go into context, but in Surah Ma'idah, ayah 44, this is a longer ayah talking about the Jews and the Christians, but it ends with, and we're just going to do the English translation at the moment, but and those who do not judge by what Allah has revealed are truly disbelievers, are truly kuffar. And in Surah Ma'idah, ayah 45, again, for the interest of time, right? This has to do with a lot of the interaction with the Jews in Medina and Bani Israel, etc. But Allah continues, and those who do not judge by what Allah has revealed are truly the wrongdoers. Those who do wrong, those who do oppression, dhulm, are the zalimun, right? And we see this, and we inherently know this. And everybody, whether you're a Muslim or not, you say, look, this law is oppressive. This system is oppressive. This group gives benefit to themselves and takes away benefit from other people. So if those who do not rule by what Allah has ruled are truly the wrongdoers. And then, again, there's other context to this, but in Surah 47, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, without doubt, explicitly. And those who do not judge by what Allah has revealed are truly the fasiqun, the wrongdoers, the people that transgress bounds, the people that do not keep things in harmony and balance. And this is something that we talked about. Look, based on our limited dependent nature, even if we are sincere people, this is what is going to happen, because we don't even understand ourselves, and we do not even understand what your needs are, what your wants are, what your thoughts, your desires, what your heart inclines towards. We're limited. If we're sincere, we'll make some mistakes. And if naturally we have prejudices, we have biases, we have tribalism, we have my family, we have my brother first, we're going to see that inherently you have structural inequality. You have this nature of, those that have continue to have, those that hoard continue to hoard, those that have power do whatever they can to maintain power. And the law of the land is might makes right, and it is the law of the jungle. The fittest survive, and if you can't make it, too bad. Good luck. Do what you got to do. How much time do we have? Okay, 1 or 2 minutes. So there's a couple of other ayat I want to mention. Maybe we can do them in the Q&A. But I want to make them clear, right? if there's anything you took from this talk, right? If we can kind of summarize this into a nutshell, is that for sure, evidently, observably, there is structural inequality and it is undeniable reality before us. But what is our response to it as Muslims? And that is something that we need to revise a little bit, because particularly we need to understand that the limited and fickle nature of mankind will always lead to inequality, injustice, oppression, and contradiction, while the laws, injunctions rule. And this is a critical point, no matter who's in power, right? So a lot of the narrative on inequality is that, look, for example, Black people have been marginalized. So if we help, if Black people, for example, help make laws in legislature, it's going to fix the problem. Or some people say, well, look, women have been marginalized and oppressed, but if we get women in power, then, things will balance out. Or if we get, if somehow some Muslim sneaks into Senate or whatever, things will start being balanced out or something like that. But this kind of brings into the Islamic frame that, look, you can be as sincere as possible. You can be the nicest dude possible. You can be well-intentioned, but by your nature, dude, you're limited, you're dependent. How can you tell me what's good for me when you don't even know what's good for yourself? And accordingly, it is only by ruling by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger have brought can this lead to true justice, harmony, balance, and good in society, love and understanding and harmony. And a last sort of call to action, right? So if we understand the context of what we're talking about, the rational basis behind it, the Islamic lens in which we need to view things, as individuals, we need to build conviction in our deen, right? This is something that we need to do as individuals. And as a community, we need to foster the confidence and the courage to carry it as much needed alternative to the maze of confusion, injustice, oppression, and jahiliyyah, that everyone is living under. And we cannot afford to be on the back foot on this. Like we mentioned in the beginning, look, this is something that's going to affect ourselves, our children, our community. So either we are in the forefront or taking charge, or we're in the back taking orders, and it's up to you. And again, there's a lot to say, but I wanted to just end on one quote, right? By a figure that I think, especially in the community, in our current times, that I think everyone has deep respect for, especially in his fight against structural inequality. And that is a quote from Malcolm X, and I'll end it with this. He says, regarding his understanding of Islam, that he says that America needs to understand Islam, because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have been considered white, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practically by all together, irrespective of their color. And inshallah, I'd like to leave it at that. Jazakallah khair. And we're going to sort of switch off the live, and we can kind of open it up to questions and